The morning sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of Courtroom 5B in the Travis County Courthouse, but Rebecca Chen felt only coldness. She glanced down at the small hand clutched in hers, so tiny, so fragile, belonging to a child who had become Austin's most heartbreaking mystery. Emma Martinez sat beside her on the hard wooden bench, her legs dangling several inches above the floor, not quite reaching the ground. The little girl's dark curls had been carefully brushed that morning, pulled back with a yellow ribbon that matched her dress. Rebecca had chosen yellow deliberately, hopeful, bright, sunny, all the things this child's life hadn't been. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed through the courtroom, and Rebecca gently tugged Emma to her feet. 8 months, 243 days to be exact. That's how long Emma had been silent. Not a word, not a cry, not even a whimper. Rebecca had fostered 17 children over the past decade, each carrying their own scars, but Emma was different. This child's silence wasn't defiance or stubbornness. It was something much deeper, much darker. It was the silence of a soul that had witnessed something so terrible that words had simply stopped. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, her black robe sweeping behind her like dark wings. She was known throughout Travis County as fair but firm, a woman who'd seen every tragedy the foster system could produce and somehow maintained her compassion. But even she looked troubled as she settled into her chair and opened the file marked DOE, Emma, Jane, EST. Age 3. Rebecca's stomach notched. That name, Jane Doe, still appeared on official documents because despite 8 months of investigation, no one knew who Emma really was. The courtroom slowly filled with the usual cast of characters in these heartbreaking proceedings. Jennifer Walsh, the overworked Child Protective Services caseworker, clutched an overstuffed folder to her chest. Dr. Raymond Hughes, the child psychiatrist who'd evaluated Emma 7 times, adjusted his glasses nervously. Maria Gonzalez, the assistant district attorney assigned to the case, reviewed her notes with a frown that had become permanent over the past months. They all knew what today meant. If no family could be found, if Emma remained unable to communicate her identity, Judge Morrison would have to make an impossible decision: keep Emma in foster care indefinitely, or begin the process of terminating parental rights so she could be adopted. Either way, Emma would officially become a child without a past, a ghost in the system. Rebecca remembered the night Emma had arrived at her home with perfect, terrible clarity. It was January 15th, nearly 9 months ago, and a brutal cold front had swept through central Texas. The temperature had dropped to 32 degrees, freezing for Austin. Rebecca had been preparing for bed when her phone rang at 11:47 p.m. "Rebecca, it's Jennifer from CPS. I need an emergency placement, right now." "How old?" Rebecca had asked, already pulling on clothes. "We think 3, maybe young 4. She was found on Highway 71, hypothermic, dehydrated, alone." The pause that followed told Rebecca everything. Survivors. "From what? That's the problem, Rebecca. We don't know where she came from." When Jennifer arrived with Emma 30 minutes later, Rebecca understood why the caseworker's voice had sounded so strained. The child was wrapped in an emergency blanket, her lips still tinged blue, her eyes vast and empty. She moved like a sleepwalker, allowing herself to be guided but not really there. Rebecca had worked with trauma before, but this was different. It was as if Emma had left her body behind and taken her mind somewhere far away, somewhere safe from whatever horrors she'd endured. "Emma," Rebecca had knelt down, making herself small and non-threatening. "My name is Rebecca. You're safe now. You're going to stay with me for a while, okay?" The child's eyes had focused on her for just a moment, a flicker of recognition that someone was speaking, but no response came. Not a nod, not a blink of understanding, just that empty stare. Over the following weeks, Rebecca learned the sparse facts of Emma's discovery. A truck driver had called 911 after spotting something small and yellow in the emergency lane of Highway 71, about 15 miles outside Austin. When first responders arrived, they found Emma sitting on the cold pavement, soaking wet despite no rain, clutching something in her fist so tightly they had to wait until she was sedated at the hospital to pry it open. Inside was a photograph, torn in half, showing a woman and a child at a playground. The photo was too water-damaged to make out faces clearly. 3 miles down the highway, police found a wrecked sedan wrapped around an oak tree. The driver, a woman in her late 20s, was dead. No identification, no registration in the vehicle that matched the VIN. The car had been reported stolen from El Paso 6 weeks earlier. Fingerprints led nowhere. Dental records were running but hadn't produced matches. DNA was in the system, waiting. The assumption was that the woman was Emma's mother, that she'd somehow gotten the child out of the car before or after the crash. But if so, how had Emma ended up so far from the accident scene? And why was she soaking wet? The nearest water source was a drainage ditch, but it had been dry that night. Nothing made sense. Emma was treated for exposure and dehydration at Dell Children's Medical Center. Physical examination revealed she was well-nourished, up-to-date on vaccinations, and showed no signs of physical abuse beyond some old bruises consistent with normal childhood falls. But psychologically, she was unreachable. MRI and CT scans showed no brain damage. Her hearing was perfect. Physically, she could speak. She simply wouldn't. Dr. Hughes had tried everything: play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, even animal-assisted therapy with gentle rabbits and guinea pigs. Nothing. Emma would cooperate mechanically, moving puzzle pieces or holding crayons, but there was no spark, no connection. She was a 3-year-old child who had forgotten how to be a child. "Ms. Chen," Judge Morrison's voice snapped Rebecca back to the present. "Would you approach the bench, please?" Rebecca's heart hammered as she stood. This was it, the moment that would determine Emma's future. She glanced down at the little girl who sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. "Bring Emma, please," the judge added gently. Rebecca took Emma's hand and walked toward the bench, their footsteps echoing in the quiet courtroom. She had prepared a statement, had rehearsed what she would say about Emma's progress, about her willingness to continue fostering, about her hope for adoption if no family emerged. But as they reached the front of the courtroom, as Rebecca opened her mouth to speak, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom suddenly swung open. Everyone turned, and everything changed. Officer Sarah Mitchell had been having one of those mornings where nothing went according to plan. First, her alarm hadn't gone off, making her 20 minutes late to the station. Then, her patrol car had a flat tire, forcing her to switch vehicles. And now, standing outside courtroom 5B with her K-9 partner Max, she realized the bailiff had given her the wrong time for their testimony. "We're not on the docket until 2 o'clock, the bailiff said, checking his tablet with an apologetic shrug. "Sorry about the confusion. You're welcome to wait inside if you want. Better than standing in the hallway." Sarah sighed, looking down at Max. The German Shepherd gazed back at her with those intelligent brown eyes that somehow always seemed to understand exactly what she was thinking. At 5 years old, Max was in his prime, 90 pounds of muscle, training, and an almost supernatural ability to find people who didn't want to be found, or couldn't be found. "What do you think, partner?" Sarah whispered. "Should we grab coffee or just wait it out?" Max's tail gave a single wag. "Stay," it seemed to say. "All right, but you'd better behave yourself," Sarah said, pushing open the heavy courtroom door as quietly as possible. "This is family court. Lots of emotions in here." The courtroom was already in session, and Sarah immediately felt like an intruder. She recognized the setup instantly, a foster care hearing. She'd testified in dozens of them over the years, usually in cases where parents had been arrested and children needed emergency placement. These proceedings always carried a particular kind of heaviness, a weight of broken families and uncertain futures. A bailiff near the door gestured toward the back row, indicating they should sit and wait quietly. Sarah nodded, grateful, and led Max down the side aisle, trying to make as little noise as possible. Her boots still clicked against the marble floor, and she winced with each step, drawing a few curious glances from the people gathered in the gallery. Max, as always, was perfectly behaved. He'd been trained at the Austin Police Department's K-9 Academy and had graduated top of his class. Search and rescue was his specialty, but he'd also been certified in tracking, evidence detection, and most impressively, what the department called disaster response. Max could find people in collapsed buildings, dense woods, underwater vehicles, anywhere a human might be hidden or trapped. Sarah settled into the wooden bench at the back of the courtroom, and Max immediately sat beside her, his posture alert but relaxed. She'd worked with 3 other K-9 partners before Max, but none of them had possessed his almost uncanny intuition. It was as if he could sense things before they happened, read situations before they fully developed. From her vantage point, Sarah could see the proceedings unfold. A woman, foster mother, probably stood near the judge's bench with a small child. The little girl wore a yellow dress and had dark curly hair pulled back with a ribbon. Something about the scene tugged at Sarah's memory, but she couldn't quite place it. The woman appeared to be answering questions, though Sarah couldn't hear clearly from the back. Max shifted slightly beside her and Sarah glanced down. The dog's ears had perked forward, his attention suddenly focused on something in the courtroom. His nose lifted slightly, testing the air. Sarah had learned to trust these moments. Max didn't react to nothing. When he showed interest, there was always a reason. "Easy boy," she whispered, resting her hand on his head. "We're just observers here." But Max's attention didn't waver. His gaze was locked on the front of the courtroom, specifically on that little girl in the yellow dress. His tail began a slow, uncertain wag, not the happy greeting wag he gave to friendly strangers, but something different, something Sarah had only seen a handful of times in their 3 years together. Recognition. Sarah's heart rate picked up. That was impossible, wasn't it? Max encountered hundreds of people in their daily work. Why would he recognize a random child in a courtroom? Unless... She pulled out her phone, keeping it low and silent, and opened the department's case management system. Max's behavior had triggered something in her own memory, a nagging sensation that she was missing something important. She scrolled through their mission history going back months, January, February. Nothing stood out. But then her thumb hovered over a case from 8 months ago. Highway 71, midnight response, single vehicle accident with 1 fatality, and a search and rescue operation that had. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The child. Max had found a child that night. A little girl, maybe 3 years old, nearly frozen to death in a drainage ditch a quarter mile from the accident scene. Sarah remembered it vividly now because it had been such a strange call. The accident victim had been alone in the vehicle according to initial reports, but Max had insisted there was someone else out there. He'd pulled away from the crash site, ignoring the deceased driver, and dragged Sarah through the darkness until he found the toddler. The child had been hypothermic, non-responsive, clutching something in her tiny fist. EMTs had taken over, rushing her to Dell Children's. Sarah had filed her report, documented Max's find, and then, what? She'd never followed up. There had been other cases, other emergencies, and the child had survived. That's all that mattered at the time. But looking at that little girl in the yellow dress now, at the way she sat so still, so quiet, at the foster mother holding her hand. Could it be the same child? Sarah's fingers flew across her phone screen, pulling up the incident report. Date, January 15th. Location, Highway 71, mile marker 52. Found, female child, approximately 36 months old, Jane Doe. Condition, severe hypothermia, dehydration, nonverbal. Transported to Dell Children's Medical Center. Status, turned over to Child Protective Services, no family located. The case had gone cold. The accident victim had never been identified. The child, listed as Emma Martinez, Jane Doe, had apparently been unable to provide any information about who she was or what had happened. Sarah looked at Max, whose attention remained absolutely fixed on the little girl. "Is that her?" she whispered. "Is that the child you found?" Max's tail wagged again, more insistently this time. And then something happened that made Sarah's blood run cold. The little girl, Emma, suddenly went rigid in her seat. Even from the back of the courtroom, Sarah could see the change in the child's posture. The foster mother noticed too, her head turning, her hand instinctively tightening around Emma's. Emma's head turned slowly, scanning the courtroom, her eyes searching for something. And when her gaze finally landed on the back row, on the police officer and her German shepherd, she stopped moving entirely. The child stared at Max. Max stared back at the child. Recognition passed between them like an electric current. Sarah felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She'd been a police officer for 12 years, worked with K-9 units for 8 of those years, and she'd never seen anything quite like this. It was as if time had stopped, as if everyone else in the courtroom had ceased to exist, and there were only 2 beings in the universe, a traumatized child and the dog who had saved her life. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, her hand tightening on Max's lead. "She remembers you." Before Sarah could process what was happening, before she could decide what to do, Emma moved. The little girl slipped out of her seat like water, her small hand pulling free from the foster mother's grasp. And then, in front of a judge, lawyers, social workers, and a courtroom full of witnesses, 3-year-old Emma Martinez, who hadn't spoken a single word in 8 months, began walking with absolute purpose toward the back of the courtroom. Toward Max, the foster mother's voice died mid-sentence. Rebecca Chen had been answering Judge Morrison's question about Emma's daily routine, what she ate for breakfast, whether she played with toys, if she showed any signs of emotional progress, when she felt Emma's hand slip from her grasp. It happened so quickly, so smoothly, that for a heartbeat Rebecca thought she'd imagined it. But when she looked down, her hand was empty. Emma was moving. "Emma," Rebecca's voice came out as a whisper, confusion flooding through her. In 8 months, Emma had never moved independently like this. The child went where she was led, sat where she was placed, ate what was put in front of her. She was compliant to the point of being almost robotic, but she never initiated. She never chose. She never wanted. Until now. Judge Morrison's head snapped up from the document spread before her. "Is everything?" But the judge's question evaporated as everyone in the courtroom turned to watch the impossible sight unfolding before them. Emma Martinez, the ghost child of Travis County, was walking. Not the shuffling, reluctant steps Rebecca had grown accustomed to during their morning routines. Not the mechanical movements of a wind-up doll being guided from room to room. This was different. This was purposeful. Emma's small patent leather shoes clicked against the marble floor with determination, each step deliberate and sure. Her yellow dress swayed with her movement, the ribbon in her hair bouncing slightly. But it was her face that stopped everyone's breath. For 8 months, Emma's expression had been a blank canvas, empty, distant, unreachable. She looked through people, not at them. Her eyes had been windows to an abandoned house, dark and lifeless. But now there was something there, a spark, a light, recognition. Her dark eyes were locked on something at the back of the courtroom with an intensity that was almost frightening in its focus. She didn't blink, didn't look away, didn't hesitate. "Someone stop her," Jennifer Walsh, the CPS caseworker, half stood from her seat, her folder of documents sliding toward the edge of the table. But her voice carried no real conviction. She was as mesmerized as everyone else. Dr. Hughes, the psychiatrist, leaned forward so far he nearly fell out of his chair. His hand reached instinctively for the notebook he always carried, but he didn't write anything. He just watched, his mouth slightly open, his clinical detachment shattered by what he was witnessing. Rebecca started to follow, to retrieve Emma, to apologize to the judge for the disruption. But Judge Morrison raised her hand, stopping her. "Wait," the judge said softly. "Let's see what happens." Emma passed the prosecutor's table. Maria Gonzalez, who had been reviewing notes about the challenges of placing nonverbal children, set down her pen and watched the little girl walk by. Emma didn't even glance at her. Her focus never wavered from her destination. She passed the gallery section where court observers sat, social work students doing field placement, a reporter from the Austin American-Statesman covering foster care reform, an elderly couple waiting for their own case to be called. All of them turned to track Emma's progress, their own concerns forgotten. The little girl's breathing had changed. Rebecca could hear it from several feet away, faster, shallower, almost excited. Emma's hands, which usually hung limp at her sides, were slightly raised, her fingers spread as if reaching for something precious. At the back of the courtroom, Officer Sarah Mitchell had gone completely still. She'd been fumbling with her phone, pulling up case files, trying to understand the impossible connection she was seeing. But now she just sat frozen, one hand on Max's head, the other gripping the edge of the bench hard enough to make her knuckles white. Max, the German shepherd, remained in a perfect sit, but his entire body quivered with contained energy. His tail had begun wagging, slowly at first, then faster, sweeping back and forth across the polished wood of the bench. His ears were forward, his head tilted slightly, his intelligent brown eyes tracking every step the little girl took toward him. A low whine escaped from Max's throat, not distressed, but eager, almost joyful. It was a sound Sarah had only heard him make a handful of times, usually when reuniting with someone he loved after a long separation. "Easy boy," Sarah whispered, though her own voice shook. "Stay." Emma was 15 feet away now, then 10, then 5. The courtroom had gone absolutely silent. Even the air conditioning system seemed to have paused, as if the building itself was holding its breath. 73 people, the judge, attorneys, social workers, observers, the bailiff, the court reporter, all watched without moving, without speaking, as a 3-year-old child who hadn't uttered a sound in 8 months approached a police dog. Rebecca's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Her foster care training screamed warnings in her head. Dogs can be unpredictable. The child could be scared. This could traumatize her further. Stop this. But something deeper, something instinctual told her to wait, to trust, to let this moment unfold. Emma stopped directly in front of Max. The German shepherd was enormous compared to her, 90 pounds of muscle and fur to her 35 pounds of tiny human. His head was nearly level with hers, even though he was sitting. One bite could do terrible damage. One wrong move could end in tragedy. But Max didn't move wrong. He didn't move at all except for that tail still wagging, and his eyes, so focused on Emma's face it was almost human in its intensity. Emma raised her right hand slowly, so slowly it seemed to take forever. Her small fingers, still baby-soft with their tiny nails that Rebecca had carefully trimmed just that morning, extended toward Max's face. Officer Mitchell's grip on Max's lead tightened, ready to pull him back if needed. But she didn't pull. Something told her not to. Emma's fingers made contact with Max's nose. That black, wet, cold nose that had tracked hundreds of scents, found dozens of lost people, saved countless lives. She touched it gently, almost reverently, as if confirming he was real. Max's tail wagged faster. Then Emma's hand moved to his head, her fingers sinking into the thick black and tan fur behind his ears. A tremor ran through her small body, not fear, but emotion so powerful it couldn't be contained. Tears began streaming down Emma's face. Not the silent tears that Rebecca had sometimes seen late at night when Emma thought no one was watching. These were different. These were tears of recognition, of memory, of something breaking open inside a child who had been locked away from the world. Emma's other hand came up, both hands now buried in Max's fur. The dog remained perfectly still, as if he understood that this moment was fragile, sacred, that one wrong move could shatter it. And then Emma's lips parted. Rebecca watched, her own tears starting, as Emma's mouth formed shapes it hadn't formed in 243 days. The little girl's throat worked, muscles remembering how to create sound after so long being silent. Judge Morrison leaned forward in her chair, every molecule of her attention focused on the child. Dr. Hughes stopped breathing. Jennifer Walsh's hand flew to her mouth. The entire courtroom leaned in collectively, straining to hear what everyone somehow knew was coming. Emma's face pressed against Max's fur, her small body beginning to shake with sobs. And then, muffled but unmistakable, 2 words emerged from her throat, 2 words that would change everything, that would unlock mysteries and reveal truths and set in motion a chain of events that would reach back 8 months and forward into a future no one could have predicted. 2 words spoken in a voice rusty from disuse, broken with emotion, but clear enough for everyone in courtroom 5B to hear. My hero, the words hung in the air like a thunderclap. My hero. For a moment nobody moved, nobody breathed. It was as if Emma's voice, that small, trembling, miraculous voice, had cast a spell over the entire courtroom, freezing everyone in place. Then chaos erupted. She spoke. Jennifer Walsh was on her feet, her folder crashing to the floor, papers scattering everywhere. Oh my God, she spoke. Dr. Hughes stood so quickly his chair tipped backward with a crash that made several people jump. His face had gone pale, his hands shaking as he reached for his phone. This is unprecedented, in all my years. Judge Morrison's gavel came down once sharply, order, but even her voice carried an edge of emotion, a tremor of something that might have been wonder or might have been tears. Everyone sit down, now. But Rebecca couldn't sit down. She was moving toward Emma, her legs carrying her forward without conscious thought, tears streaming down her face. 8 months. 8 months of silence, of wondering if she'd ever hear this child's voice, of lying awake at night fearing Emma was lost forever in whatever dark place trauma had taken her. And now 2 words, my hero. Emma hadn't moved. She remained pressed against Max, her small arms wrapped around his neck, her face buried in his fur. Her whole body shook with sobs, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded inside her. Max stayed perfectly still, his head slightly lowered, allowing the little girl to cling to him. But his tail never stopped wagging, and his eyes, those remarkable brown eyes, had taken on a soft, almost protective quality. Officer Sarah Mitchell was staring at her phone screen, her face draining of color as pieces clicked into place. Her fingers flew across the screen, pulling up files, cross-referencing dates, confirming what her gut already knew. It's her, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible, then louder, standing abruptly. It's her, Judge Morrison, it's her. The judge's head snapped toward the back of the courtroom. Officer, do you have something to contribute to these proceedings? Sarah's training took over. She straightened, her hand instinctively moving to smooth her uniform, though it was already impeccable. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but I believe I have critical information about this child's case. Approach, Judge Morrison commanded, her voice sharp but her eyes bright with interest. Sarah moved quickly down the aisle, Max walking in perfect heel position beside her. As they passed Emma, the little girl's head turned, following Max's movement. Her arms loosened slightly, her tear-stained face emerging from his fur. Don't take him, Emma whispered, her voice hoarse and broken but audible. 3 more words. 5 words total in 8 months. Please don't take him away. Rebecca had reached Emma now and knelt beside her, but she didn't pull the child away from Max. Instead, she placed a gentle hand on Emma's back. Sweetheart, the officer just needs to talk to the judge. Max isn't going anywhere yet, okay? Emma's grip loosened a fraction more, but her eyes never left Max. Sarah reached the bench and pulled up her phone, turning it so Judge Morrison could see the screen. Your Honor, 8 months ago, on January 15th, my K-9 partner Max, and I responded to a single-vehicle accident on Highway 71. The driver was deceased at the scene, but Max indicated there was another person out there. He insisted on it. He pulled me away from the accident site and tracked for approximately a quarter mile until he found a child. Judge Morrison's eyes widened as she read the incident report on the screen. A child. A little girl approximately 3 years old, suffering from severe hypothermia and dehydration. She was in a drainage ditch, soaking wet, nearly frozen. Max found her in complete darkness with temperatures at 32 degrees. Another hour and she would have died. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. That child was nonverbal, unidentified, and turned over to CPS. I never followed up because other cases came in, and I assumed the family situation had been resolved. The courtroom had gone silent again, everyone straining to hear. The child Max found that night, Sarah continued, her voice stronger now, was listed as Jane Doe in my report, estimated age 3 years, dark hair, brown eyes. She paused, looking back at Emma. It's the same child, Your Honor, I'm certain of it. Max recognized her the moment we walked into this courtroom. Jennifer Walsh had retrieved her scattered papers and was frantically flipping through them. The dates match, she called out, her voice shaking. Emma was brought into CPS custody on January 15th at 2:17 a.m., found on Highway 71. The location matches. Dr. Hughes was pulling up files on his tablet, his clinical mask completely shattered. The admission records from Dell Children's show she arrived with severe hypothermia. The EMT report mentions a K-9 unit finding her. He looked up, his eyes wide behind his glasses. How did we miss this? How did no one connect these cases? Different databases, Maria Gonzalez, the assistant DA, said grimly. She was already on her laptop pulling up records. The accident investigation went through the Highway Patrol and Criminal Investigation Division. The child welfare case went through CPS and Family Court, unless someone specifically cross-referenced them. She trailed off, shaking her head in frustration. Judge Morrison's jaw tightened. Officer Mitchell, do you have any information about the accident victim? Any identification? Sarah shook her head. No, Your Honor. The victim was a female, late 20s, deceased on impact. No ID on her person, no registration in the vehicle. The car was reported stolen from El Paso 6 weeks prior to the accident. We ran prints and dental, submitted DNA, but nothing came back. The case is still open, classified as an unidentified deceased person. And you think the victim was Emma's mother? The judge's voice was careful, measured. The working theory was that the driver somehow got the child out of the vehicle before or after the crash, but we could never figure out how Emma ended up so far away. The accident scene showed no evidence of a child being in the car, no car seat, no toys, nothing. It was like she appeared out of nowhere. Rebecca spoke up from where she knelt beside Emma. Could the mother have been carrying her, running with her? Through the woods, in the dark, for a quarter mile, Sarah shook her head. And that doesn't explain why Emma was soaking wet. The drainage ditch was dry that night. We theorized she might have been in water earlier, but there was no water source nearby. Detective Marcus Webb appeared in the courtroom doorway, slightly out of breath. The bailiff must have called him. He was in his late 40s, with graying hair and the weathered look of someone who'd seen too many crime scenes. I heard there's a break in the Jane Doe case. Judge Morrison gestured him forward. Detective Webb, you worked the accident on Highway 71 8 months ago. Yes, Your Honor. Single fatality, female driver unidentified. We've had the case open but cold. No leads, no family coming forward, nothing. He pulled out his own phone, accessing case files. What's the connection? The child found that night, the judge said carefully, is sitting right there. Detective Webb's eyes found Emma, still clinging to Max, and his face went pale. Jesus, the K-9 find, I remember now. We had separate case numbers, one for the fatality, one for the child welfare incident. Standard procedure, but... He ran his hand through his hair. We should have connected them, should have realized the deceased and the child were probably related. Probably, Jennifer Walsh's voice was sharp. You're saying we still don't know if that woman was Emma's mother. The DNA from the deceased is in the system, Webb said, pulling up files. We submitted it to CODIS, state databases, genealogy sites, everything. No hits, but we never compared it to the child's DNA because they were in different databases. He looked at the judge. With your permission, we could run the comparison now. It'll take a few hours for confirmation, but we might finally get some answers. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Make it happen. What else do we know about the accident? Webb scrolled through his files. The vehicle showed signs of having been driven hard, worn tires, low fuel, minor damage consistent with rough terrain. We found defensive wounds on the victim's arms, old bruising in various stages of healing. The medical examiner's opinion was that she'd been in an abusive situation within the weeks prior to death. She was running, Rebecca said softly, still holding Emma. Everyone turned to look at her. She was running from something, someone, and she was trying to protect Emma. The little girl's head turned at the sound of her name. Her voice, when it came, was so small that people had to strain to hear it. Mama saved me. Courtroom erupted again, but this time Judge Morrison didn't reach for her gavel. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the bench, her eyes fixed on the small child who had just spoken her third complete sentence in 8 months. Mama saved me. 3 words that confirmed everything and explained nothing. Detective Webb was already moving, his phone pressed to his ear as he stepped into the hallway. His voice carried back through the open door. I need the forensics team to pull the Martinez-Jane Doe case files. Yes, all of them. And get me the DNA comparison between the Highway 71 victim and the child, Emma Martinez. I need it yesterday. Rebecca gently turned Emma to face her, keeping one hand on the child's shoulder while the other wiped tears from those small cheeks. Emma, sweetheart, can you tell us what happened? Can you tell us about your mama? Emma's eyes, so empty for so long, were alive now but filled with a pain that no 3-year-old should ever have to carry. Her lip trembled. Mama was scared. The bad man was coming. The words hit the courtroom like physical blows. The bad man, Officer Mitchell repeated, her hand instinctively moving to her radio. Emma, who was the bad man? But Emma had turned back to Max, her small hands finding comfort in his fur again. The dog pressed his head against her, offering silent support. Dr. Hughes approached slowly, his professional demeanor barely containing his excitement at this breakthrough. Your Honor, if I may, Emma has just experienced a significant traumatic recall triggered by seeing the dog who saved her. This is actually a documented phenomenon. Sensory memory can unlock suppressed trauma. The dog represents safety to her, which is allowing her to access memories she's been unable to process. In English, Doctor, Judge Morrison said, though not unkindly. She couldn't talk about it before because she didn't feel safe enough. Max makes her feel safe. We need to let this proceed carefully, but we also need to document everything she says right now, because this window may not stay open long. The court reporter's fingers were already flying across her stenotype machine, capturing every word. Detective Webb returned, his face grim. I've got 2 teams mobilizing. One's pulling the physical evidence from the accident. We stored the vehicle, the victim's clothing, everything. The other team is accessing CPS intake records from that night. We're going to reconstruct every detail of what happened. Detective, Maria Gonzalez called out, the torn photograph. Emma was holding something when she was found, right? Do we still have it? Webb nodded. In evidence storage, a photograph torn in half, too water damaged to make out faces clearly. We tried photo enhancement but couldn't get enough detail. I want it retrieved immediately, Judge Morrison ordered. And someone contact Dell Children's Medical Center. Get me every record from Emma's admission that night. Every note, every observation, every detail no matter how small. Jennifer Walsh was on her phone, her voice rapid fire as she spoke to someone at CPS headquarters. Yes, I need the complete intake file for Emma Martinez, case number 2024 JD0847. Photos, medical reports, the EMT statements, the emergency placement documentation, everything. She paused, listening, then her eyes widened. What do you mean there's a note? What kind of note? The courtroom went silent. Jennifer's hand shook as she held the phone. Read it to me, every word. She listened, her face going pale. Oh God, she looked up at the judge. Your Honor, there's a notation in the intake file from the EMT who transported Emma that night. It says, and I quote, "Child kept repeating two words during transport, though very faint and unclear. Sounded like Mama hide or Mama tried. Child was unresponsive to questions and did not speak again upon arrival at hospital." "Mama hide," Rebecca whispered, her arms instinctively tightening around Emma. She was trying to tell them what happened, but she was too traumatized to be understood. Officer Mitchell was scrolling through her own case files, her training kicking in. The timeline doesn't make sense. The accident was called in at 11:43 p.m. by a passing truck driver. First responders arrived at 11:51 p.m. The driver was deceased, appeared to have died on impact, but Max didn't find Emma until 12:37 a.m., almost an hour after the accident. An hour, Detective Webb repeated, his mind clearly working through scenarios. What happened during that hour? Where was Emma? Hiding, a small voice said. Everyone turned. Emma had pulled away from Max slightly, her face visible now, streaked with tears but more present than Rebecca had ever seen her. The child's voice was stronger, gaining confidence with each word. "Mama told me to hide," she said. "Run to the water, baby. Hide in the water until the dog finds you. The dog will keep you safe." Emma's eyes found Officer Mitchell. "She said the police would have dogs, that they would find me, that I should wait for the hero dog." Sarah Mitchell's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the edge of the bench for support. The mother knew. Somehow, she knew we'd bring K-9 units for the search. "She planned it," Maria Gonzalez said slowly, horror and admiration mixing in her voice. "She knew she was dying, or knew she might not survive, and she told Emma to hide so the bad man wouldn't find her. She told her to wait for a rescue dog." "But the water," Dr. Hughes interjected. "Emma, you said your mama told you to hide in the water. There was no water at the accident scene." Emma's small fingers twisted in Max's fur. "The pipe. The big pipe with the water inside. It was cold and dark and scary, but Mama said the bad man wouldn't find me there. She said to stay until the dog came." Detective Webb was already pulling up satellite imagery on his phone. A drainage pipe. Jesus, there's a culvert system that runs under Highway 71 in that area. During dry season they're mostly empty, but there would be residual water, especially after the rains we'd had that week. He looked up, his face stricken. "We searched those culverts, but not for over an hour. Standard protocol is to secure the accident scene first, then expand the search radius." If Emma was hiding in a culvert filled with freezing water. "She waited," Officer Mitchell finished, her voice breaking. "She waited in freezing water for an hour because her mother told her to. A 3-year-old child sat in the dark, in the cold, alone, because she trusted her mother's last words." Rebecca was openly crying now, holding Emma close. The little girl's bravery, her mother's desperate final act, it was too much, too heartbreaking. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the emotion, steady and commanding despite the tears on her own cheeks. "Detective Webb, I want to know everything about this bad man. Run the victim's DNA through every database we have access to, criminal, missing persons, genealogy sites, everything. Someone is looking for this woman and child, or someone should be." "Already on it, Your Honor," Webb confirmed. "If the victim has any family in any system anywhere, we'll find them. And if there's a bad man who was chasing them," his jaw set in a hard line, "we'll find him too." Emma's voice interrupted again, so quiet they almost missed it. "Daddy, the bad man was my daddy. He hurt Mama. He said he would hurt me too. That's why we runned away." The final piece clicked into place. Detective Webb's expression turned to stone. Domestic violence situation. Mother fleeing with child. She either didn't have time to file reports or was too scared to, or did file reports that went nowhere, Jennifer Walsh added bitterly, speaking from years of experience in the system. "How many times have we seen it? Woman reports abuse, nothing happens, she's forced to run." "The stolen car," Officer Mitchell said. "She probably didn't steal it. She borrowed it or bought it off the books trying to stay off the grid." "No ID, no registration," Webb confirmed. "She was trying to disappear, trying to protect her daughter." He looked at Emma with something like reverence. "And in her final moments, even dying in a car crash, she managed to save her child's life." The next 47 minutes moved with the controlled urgency of a hospital emergency room. Judge Morrison transformed Courtroom 5B into a makeshift command center, her usual strict adherence to protocol bending under the weight of extraordinary circumstances. Detective Webb had pulled 2 chairs together in the corner, his laptop open, 3 phones arranged in front of him like weapons. Every few minutes one would buzz or ring, and he'd snatch it up, firing questions at whoever was on the other end. "No, I need the full toxicology report, not the preliminary." "Yes, compare the dental records to the missing persons database going back 3 years. Expand the search to nationwide, not just Texas." Officer Mitchell had refused to leave, even though her testimony wasn't needed until the afternoon. She remained in the back row, Max still sitting beside her in perfect formation. But every few minutes, Emma would turn around from where she sat with Rebecca, her eyes finding Max, as if checking to make sure he hadn't disappeared. Each time, the dog's tail would wag once, a signal that he was still there, still watching over her. Dr. Hughes had abandoned all pretense of clinical detachment. He sat 3 rows back, documenting everything in his notebook with shaking hands, occasionally looking up at Emma with an expression that mixed professional fascination with genuine emotion. "Remarkable," he kept muttering. "Absolutely remarkable." Jennifer Walsh coordinated with CPS headquarters, pulling files, cross-referencing cases, building a timeline. Her desk was covered with printouts, sticky notes in 3 different colors marking critical information. "Judge Morrison," she called out, "I've got something. There's a bolo be on the lookout from El Paso Police Department dated December 20th, about 3 weeks before the accident. Woman and child domestic violence situation, considered endangered missing persons." "Name," Webb barked. Jennifer's eyes scanned the document. Mariella Reyes, age 28. Daughter Emma Reyes, age 3. Last seen leaving a women's shelter in El Paso on December 18th. She looked up, her face pale. The description matches. Brown hair, brown eyes, approximately 5'4". The child, Emma, same description. Birth date listed as March 3rd, which would make her 3 years and 2 months old at the time of the accident. "Reyes," Webb repeated, typing rapidly. "Running it now." His screen filled with information, and his expression darkened with each line he read. Jesus Christ. Mariella Reyes filed 3 domestic violence reports in El Paso between 2022 and 2023. Victim of repeated assault by her partner, Diego Vasquez. Restraining order issued April 2023, violated twice. She filed for sole custody of Emma in May 2023. The case was still pending when she disappeared. "Where's Vasquez now?" Judge Morrison's voice was sharp as a blade. Webb's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Checking. Hold on." His face went rigid. "Son of a bitch. He's got a warrant out for his arrest. Assault with a deadly weapon issued January 28th, 2 weeks after the accident. El Paso PD has been looking for him." He grabbed his phone. "I'm calling them now." While Webb stepped into the hallway, his voice rising as he spoke to the El Paso detectives, Emma had quietly moved from Rebecca's side and was walking back toward Max again. This time, Rebecca didn't stop her. Neither did anyone else. They all watched as the little girl, Emma Reyes, no longer Jane Doe, knelt beside the German shepherd and whispered something only he could hear. Max's response was to gently lick her cheek. "Officer Mitchell," Judge Morrison said, "your dog has done more for this case than months of investigation. How did Max know to search so far from the accident scene?" Sarah stood, one hand resting on Max's head. "Your Honor, Max is trained in disaster response and search and rescue. When we arrived at the scene, he indicated there was a living person in the area. He was trained to prioritize living victims over deceased. He pulled away from the crashed vehicle and tracked a scent trail. I thought he was following the victim's path from the car, but now—" She paused, understanding dawning. He was tracking Emma. Mariella must have carried her daughter away from the accident before she died, or maybe she survived for a few minutes and managed to get Emma to hide. Max picked up Emma's scent and followed it directly to that drainage culvert. "How long can a 3-year-old survive in near-freezing water?" Dr. Hughes asked, though his voice suggested he didn't really want to know the answer. "Not long," Sarah admitted. 20 minutes, maybe 30 if she stayed relatively still and the water wasn't too deep, but Emma was in that culvert for over an hour. "Adrenaline," Dr. Hughes said quietly. "Fear can produce extraordinary survival responses. Her mother told her to wait for the hero dog, so she waited. She believed rescue was coming." "And it did," Rebecca added, watching Emma lean against Max. "Max saved her life." Detective Webb returned, his face grave. "El Paso PD has confirmed that Diego Vasquez has been missing since January 14th, the day before the accident. They believe he tracked Mariella down, that he was pursuing her. The stolen vehicle report from El Paso. It came from a shelter volunteer who let Mariella borrow her car to escape. The woman was too afraid of Vasquez to file charges initially, but eventually came forward." "So he was chasing them," Maria Gonzalez said. "Mariella was fleeing with Emma, trying to get away, and Vasquez was hunting them." "The accident," Officer Mitchell said slowly, piecing it together. "Was it really an accident?" Webb's expression answered the question before his words did. The accident reconstruction team noted that the vehicle showed signs of being forced off the road. "We thought maybe she swerved to avoid an animal, but there was paint transfer on the rear quarter panel, dark blue, consistent with another vehicle making contact. We didn't pursue it because we had no leads." He looked at Judge Morrison. "I think Vasquez ran her off the road. I think he caused that crash deliberately." The courtroom went deathly silent. "If he ran her off the road," Jennifer Walsh said carefully, "then after the crash he would have come looking. He would have checked to make sure she was dead." "And if he found Emma—" Rebecca couldn't finish the sentence. She looked at the little girl, now curled up against Max's side, and felt sick. "But he didn't find her," Officer Mitchell said firmly, "because Mariella told Emma to hide. Even dying, even knowing Vasquez might still be out there, she gave her daughter a chance. She told her to hide in the water to wait for the rescue dog." "Mariella knew police would bring K-9 units," Webb added. "She was counting on it. She sacrificed everything, including those final moments she could have spent with her daughter, to make sure Emma stayed hidden from Vasquez." Judge Morrison's hands trembled slightly as she picked up her gavel. "Detective Webb, I want Diego Vasquez found, today. Issue a nationwide BOLO. Contact the FBI if you need to. This man is dangerous and he's been hunting a child." "Already done, Your Honor. Every law enforcement agency in the country will have his photo within the hour." "And the DNA test?" the judge asked. "Confirmation that the victim was Mariella Reyes." Webb checked his phone. "Lab says 30 minutes. They're running it priority." But Emma, sitting with Max, spoke again, her voice clear despite the tears streaming down her face. "Mama loved me. She said the hero dog would save me. She was right." Every adult in that courtroom felt the weight of those words, the faith of a dying mother, the courage of a 3-year-old child, and the incredible bond between a girl and the dog who had saved her life. The DNA results came back at 2:47 p.m., projected onto Detective Webb's laptop screen for everyone to see. The match probability was displayed in cold, clinical numbers. 99.97% probability that Mariella Reyes was the biological mother of Emma Reyes. But those numbers meant everything. "She has a name now," Rebecca whispered, her hand resting on Emma's back. "You're Emma Reyes' sweetheart. Your mama was Mariella." Emma looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clearer than they'd been in months. "Mariella," she repeated carefully, tasting her mother's name. "That's Mama's name." Judge Morrison removed her reading glasses and set them on the bench. "Detective Webb, the next question is obvious. Does Mariella Reyes have any living family? Someone who's been looking for this child?" Webb was already pulling up the files, his expression intensifying as he read. "According to the missing persons report filed in El Paso, yes, Mariella's mother, Patricia Reyes, age 56, filed the initial report when Mariella and Emma disappeared. She's been calling the El Paso Police Department every week for the past 13 months, demanding updates." 13 months, Jennifer Walsh's head snapped up. "Emma was only found 8 months ago. Mariella and Emma went missing before the accident." "Mariella fled the first time in December 2023, Webb explained, scrolling through reports. "She went to a women's shelter with Emma, stayed for 3 weeks, then disappeared in mid-January when she learned Vasquez had found out where she was. Patricia Reyes has been searching ever since." "Does she know about the accident?" Judge Morrison asked carefully. "Does she know her daughter is dead?" Webb shook his head slowly. "The accident victim was never identified, so there was no way to notify next of kin. Patricia Reyes has been looking for a missing daughter and granddaughter, not knowing that her daughter died 8 months ago and her granddaughter has been in the foster system this whole time." The weight of that reality settled over the courtroom like a heavy blanket. A grandmother, searching desperately for 13 months, not knowing that the little girl she loved was alive and just 200 miles away. "We need to contact her," Rebecca said firmly. "Immediately. That woman has been living in hell, not knowing if her daughter and granddaughter were alive or dead." "I'll make the call," Detective Webb said, already dialing. He stepped into the hallway again, and through the open door they could hear his voice. "Mrs. Reyes, this is Detective Marcus Webb with the Austin Police Department. Ma'am, I need you to sit down. I have news about your daughter and granddaughter." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Emma had moved back to Rebecca's side, sensing the importance of what was happening even if she didn't fully understand it. Max remained in the back row, but his eyes never left Emma, as if he was still on duty, still protecting her. Officer Mitchell found herself blinking back tears. In 12 years of police work, she'd seen countless tragic cases, but this one was different. This one had hope threaded through the heartbreak. After what felt like an eternity, Detective Webb returned. His eyes were red, his jaw tight. "Patricia Reyes will be here in 3 hours. She's driving from Las Cruces, New Mexico. His voice cracked slightly. "She asked if Emma was okay, if her granddaughter was safe." Those were her first questions, not about Mariella, not about the details. Just, is my Emma safe? Emma's head lifted at the word granddaughter. "Abuela," she said softly, and everyone in the courtroom realized it was the first Spanish word they'd heard her speak. "Abuela Patricia." Rebecca's breath caught. "You remember your grandmother, Emma." The little girl nodded slowly. "Abuela makes cookies. She has a garden with flowers. She sings songs in Spanish." Her small face crumpled. "Does Abuela know where I am? I want to see Abuela." "She's coming, baby," Rebecca said, pulling Emma close. "Your Abuela is coming to get you. She's been looking for you for so long." Detective Webb pulled up a photo on his phone, Patricia Reyes' driver's license photo. He knelt beside Emma, showing her the screen. "Is this your Abuela?" Emma's face transformed. For the first time since they'd entered the courtroom that morning, she smiled, a genuine, bright smile that showed small white teeth and lit up her entire face. "That's Abuela. That's my Abuela Patricia." The recognition was undeniable and it meant everything. Emma had family. Real family who loved her, who had been searching for her, who would move heaven and earth to bring her home. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. "Officer Mitchell, I'm going to ask you and Max to stay until Mrs. Reyes arrives. I think Emma would feel safer with her hero here." "We're not going anywhere, Your Honor," Sarah replied immediately. "We'll stay as long as Emma needs us." The next hours passed in a strange suspension of time. The courtroom had officially recessed, but no one left. It had become something else, a waiting room, a sanctuary, a place where a family was being rebuilt piece by piece. Jennifer Walsh ordered pizza for everyone, which arrived in stacks of boxes that seemed absurdly normal given the circumstances. Emma sat with Rebecca, eating small bites of cheese pizza, occasionally looking back at Max to make sure he was still there. Each time, the dog's tail would wag. Dr. Hughes took the opportunity to conduct a brief evaluation, asking Emma gentle questions about what she remembered. She spoke more in those 2 hours than she had in the previous 8 months combined. Her voice was getting stronger, more confident, though she still pressed close to Rebecca or Max when the memories became too heavy. She remembered her mother's face. She remembered the car ride running away in the dark, her mother crying and apologizing. She remembered the terrible sound of the crash, the way the car spun and spun. She remembered her mother's voice, urgent and desperate. "Run to the water, baby. Hide until the hero dog finds you. I love you so much." She remembered waiting in the cold, dark pipe, the water up to her chest, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. She remembered being so scared, but her mama had said to wait, so she waited. She remembered the dog finding her, Max, with his warm breath and gentle mouth, carefully gripping her jacket and pulling her from the water. She remembered the lady police officer wrapping her in blankets, telling her she was safe now. But then everything had gone fuzzy and frightening. Strangers with kind faces but wrong voices. Places that weren't home. She tried to talk, tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come anymore. They'd gotten stuck somewhere inside, locked away with the fear and the cold and the memory of her mother's final words. Until today. Until Max walked into that courtroom and unlocked everything. At 5:43 p.m., the courtroom doors burst open. A woman stood in the doorway, breathing hard, her gray-streaked black hair escaping from a hasty ponytail, her face lined with 13 months of worry and fear and desperate hope. She was wearing jeans and a faded blue sweater, and her eyes, brown like Emma's, like Mariella's, scanned the courtroom frantically. "Emma," her voice broke on the name. "Mi nieta, Emma." Emma turned, looked at the woman in the doorway, and for a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the little girl whispered one word that made everything worth it: "Abuela." And she ran. Patricia Reyes collapsed to her knees as Emma crashed into her, and the sound that emerged from the grandmother's throat was something primal, part sob, part prayer, part scream of relief that had been building for 13 months. Her arms wrapped around her granddaughter with such desperate strength that Rebecca instinctively stepped forward, worried, but then stopped. This was a grandmother who had thought she might never hold this child again. "Mi nieta, mi amor, mi vida," Patricia sobbed, rocking Emma back and forth, her hands moving over the little girl's face, her hair, her arms, as if checking to make sure she was real. "I looked for you everywhere, everywhere. I never stopped. Never." Emma clung to her grandmother's neck, her small body shaking with sobs. "Abuela, Mama's gone. The bad man hurt her. She told me to hide and wait for the hero dog." Patricia pulled back just enough to look into Emma's eyes, her own streaming with tears. "I know, baby, I know. Your mama loved you so much. She saved you. She was so brave." She kissed Emma's forehead, her cheeks, her hands. "And now you're safe, and I'm never letting you go again." Judge Morrison had given up any pretense of professional composure. Tears ran freely down her face as she watched the reunion. Even the bailiff, a former Marine who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, stood at his post with suspiciously bright eyes. Detective Webb approached quietly, giving Patricia a moment before speaking. "Mrs. Reyes, I'm Detective Webb. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm so glad we could bring Emma home to you." Patricia looked up at him, one arm still locked around Emma. "You found her. You kept her safe." "Not me, ma'am." Webb gestured toward the back of the courtroom. "Officer Mitchell and her K-9 partner Max found Emma the night of the accident. Without them, Emma wouldn't have survived." Patricia's eyes found Officer Sarah Mitchell, standing at attention with Max beside her. The grandmother stood slowly, bringing Emma with her, and walked toward them. She stopped in front of the German Shepherd and then, to everyone's surprise, she knelt down and wrapped her free arm around Max's neck. "Thank you," she whispered to the dog, her voice breaking. "Thank you for saving my granddaughter. Thank you for being the hero my daughter promised." Max's tail wagged slowly, and he leaned into the embrace, accepting the gratitude with the same calm dignity he'd shown throughout the entire day. "Mrs. Reyes," Officer Mitchell said, her own voice thick with emotion, "Max was just doing his job, but I think he knew this one was special. I think he knew Emma needed to be found." Emma reached out and placed one small hand on Max's head and the other hand on her grandmother's face. "Mama said the hero dog would save me. She was right. Max saved me 2 times, once from the cold and once from being lost." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of quiet crying. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, too overcome to continue. Judge Morrison finally stood, clearing her throat. "This court needs to address the matter of custody. Mrs. Reyes, you are Emma's biological grandmother, and DNA testing has confirmed that Mariella Reyes was Emma's mother. However, given the circumstances, we need to ensure that placement with you is in Emma's best interest." Patricia stiffened slightly, fear flashing across her face, but Jennifer Walsh stepped forward quickly. "Your Honor, I've reviewed Mrs. Reyes's background. She has no criminal record, has stable housing and employment, and has been actively searching for her granddaughter for over a year. She filed missing persons reports, hired private investigators with money she didn't have, and called law enforcement weekly for updates. In my professional opinion, she is an exemplary candidate for guardianship." "I would concur," Dr. Hughes added. "Emma's recognition of her grandmother is genuine and immediate. The emotional bond is clearly strong. Removing Emma from her grandmother's care at this point would cause further trauma." Rebecca Chen stood, and though it broke her heart, she knew what she had to say. "Your Honor, I've been Emma's foster mother for 8 months. I love her, but she belongs with her grandmother. Anyone can see that." Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "Mrs. Reyes, I'm granting you temporary emergency custody of Emma Reyes, effective immediately. We'll schedule a full hearing in 30 days to finalize permanent guardianship, but I see no reason why that won't be granted." She paused, her voice softening. "Take your granddaughter home, Mrs. Reyes. Take her home and help her heal." Patricia's knees buckled with relief, and she had to lean against Officer Mitchell to stay upright. "Thank you," she gasped. "Thank you so much." But Emma tugged on her grandmother's sleeve. "Abuela, what about Max? Can Max come visit me?" Patricia looked at Officer Mitchell, who smiled through her tears. "How about this, Emma? Max and I will come visit you next month when you come back for the court hearing, and I'll make sure to bring pictures of Max so you can remember your hero." "I'll never forget," Emma said solemnly. "Max is my hero forever." 3 months later, Courtroom 5B looked entirely different. Spring sunshine poured through the windows, and the gallery was packed with people who had followed Emma's story in the news. Patricia Reyes sat at the plaintiff's table, holding Emma's hand. The little girl wore a pink dress with butterflies, and her hair had been styled in 2 braids with ribbons that matched. But everyone's attention was drawn to the back of the courtroom, where Officer Sarah Mitchell stood at attention, with Max beside her in his police vest. Pinned to that vest was a medal, the Austin Police Department's Medal of Valor, their highest honor for K-9 officers. Judge Morrison smiled as she read the final custody order, officially granting Patricia full legal guardianship. Emma Reyes, you are going home with your grandmother today and every day from now on. The courtroom erupted in applause, but Emma only had eyes for one guest. She ran to Max like she had 3 months ago, but this time she was confident, healed, transformed. She pressed her face against Max's fur one more time. You saved me twice, she whispered, repeating words that had become her mantra. Once from the cold and once from being lost. You're my hero, Max, always. As for Diego Vasquez, he was arrested 2 weeks after Emma's identity was confirmed, found hiding in a trailer park outside of Phoenix. He was charged with vehicular manslaughter, child endangerment, and violating a restraining order. He would spend the next 20 years in prison, unable to hurt anyone ever again. But that was just background noise to the real story. The story of a mother's final act of love, a child's incredible courage, a dog's unwavering dedication, and a family reunited against all odds. Sometimes heroes wear badges. Sometimes they have 4 legs and the biggest hearts. And sometimes a 3-year-old child's 2 words, my hero, are powerful enough to unlock the truth, solve a mystery, and prove that even in the darkest moments, hope survives. The end.